A smile is the most basic, yet a remarkably genuine and wordless gesture that people use on a daily basis to interact with each other. Therefore, it's not surprising that the anatomy of our teeth is an extremely important aesthetic component that could make or break our appearance. A smile with perfectly symmetric and visually pleasing teeth is quite important as we constantly present our teeth to others every time we laugh or smile. A smile also influences social signals and self-confidence, which explains why malocclusion, defined as misalignment of teeth and jaws, is often a concern to modern Western society. Studies report that only 30% have perfect teeth occlusion, meaning that 70% or the large majority do not have correctly aligned teeth. Furthermore, researchers have linked diet as a significant contributor to malocclusion, particularly in societies that eat highly processed foods. One of the first people to propose this theory was Canadian dentist Dr. Weston Price, known for documenting the tooth eruption of indigenous and nomadic hunter-gatherer societies to contrast the link between hard, unprocessed food and proper dentofacial growth. During the 17th century, significant changes were seen in food consumption, mainly due to mass production and easy availability. This in turn resulted in a considerable increase in sugar consumption and finely milled flour. These dietary alterations continued throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, with staple foods becoming increasingly mass-produced outside of the home and more easily purchased. These changes in dietary consistency alter the facial structure and can cause malocclusion. This is because of its impact on chewing and subsequently on the mechanical strain inflicted on the jaw. Uneven force vectors throughout the entire dental structure can result in asymmetry and overcrowding, which is only made worse as the face grows. Rapid cultural shifts in modern human diet from hunter-gatherer lifestyles to agriculturalist lifestyles have resulted in evolutionary changes comparatively associated with shorter mandibles and more malocclusion than their predecessors. A 2013 study by Sarig and colleagues found virtually no malocclusion characteristics in preserved ancient skulls. To prove the link between diet and malocclusion, Gorocini et al. Conducted a match case control study based on the Australian Aboriginal tribes from the Yundamu area. It is known that before industrialization, nomadic tribes ate with no utensils and their diet was composed of rarely cooked or processed foods. As a result, eating required a vigorous masticatory effort and they had nearly perfect Class 1 occlusion. The aim of the study was to explore the changes in dental occlusion related to modernized dietary habits. The study was conducted by collecting a sample of dental casts from two different groups of individuals from 1951 and 1971. The cohort was divided based on birth year, with the older group being born before 1937 and the younger consisting of people born after 1937. The two groups were then matched to another group of 48 samples from pre-contact Aboriginal crania from the South Australian Museum. They studied variables such as overbite, posterior crossbite, tooth rotation and displacement, and maxillary arch length and width. The results demonstrated that the younger, industrialized Yundamu people had an increased overbite and more malocclusions, as well as greater rotation and displacement of their jaws. The authors concluded that overall there was a shift or change in occlusion resulting in malocclusion and attributed the changes to the dietary modifications that occurred in the Yundamu settlement during the years of study. However, there were many limitations in the study. Although there was some increased genetic pooling during this time, most of the Yundamu people continued previous cultural trends of marrying within the tribe. Also, the diet shift from hunting and gathering to industrialized foodstuffs was not as clear-cut and did not occur immediately. Rather, it was a gradual shift so that these occlusional changes may have actually been a lot less abrupt. Yet another study by Gorocini and colleagues examined two cohorts of Pima American Indians, the older group from 49 to 57 and the younger group from 1963 to 1969. The diets of these two cohorts were studied extensively at the group level. The older cohort had a diet that consisted of primarily homegrown beans and stone-ground indigenous corn tortillas. The younger cohort's diet was different. It focused on commercially processed beans and pre-processed industrial cornmeal. A stratified cross-sectional sample was selected for each of the two cohorts. The average ages of the cohorts were 14 to 27, and results demonstrated a significant increase in overbite, malocclusions, tooth rotation and displacement, and a decrease in arch width in the younger 14-year-old cohort when compared to the older group of 27s. Although these findings were significant, the author recognized that there were confounding effects that may have changed the dietary factors. For instance, the younger generation received a benefit from a post-World War II dental clinic, and some individuals may have still obtained and prepared foods according to the traditional methods. Also, it would be unfair to dismiss the genetic component in all of this, as dentists have posited that race mixture may actually cause malocclusion, in that one may inherit jaw size from one parent, which may be disharmonious with tooth size from another parent. Moreover, there's also a possibility of a greater selection of damaging alleles through the accumulation of mutations. Secondly, there would also be a sampling bias in that the older cohort only consisted of people with intact dentition. In other words, those with missing teeth would not be included in the study, and therefore it would not be an accurate representation of the entire demographic. Nevertheless, the authors concluded that these changes in masticatory function due to dietary changes was a likely factor in the increase in malocclusion in the younger Pima Americans. To drill the point home, a third study by Corosini and Whitley, 1981, examined occlusional variation in a rural Kentucky community. The study was a cross-sectional stratified sampling of 180 rural residents in an isolated community. The area was selected based on relative isolation, no dental treatment beyond emergency extractions, and an acute change in diet 25 years before the sampling took place. The study consisted of bite impressions in thin wax for occlusional relationships, dietary information, age, and the birthplace of participants. Occlusional characteristics were taken from the bite impressions and were used to calculate the treatment priority index as a way of ranking dental flaws by severity and importance. This index assigns weights to 5 variables that constitute occlusion, such as overbite, open bite, overjet, posterior crossbite, first molar buccal segment, and so on. Dietary information was used to categorize individuals into 4 categories: modern, so entirely commercially purchased; semi-modern, beef is the main basic meat, garden foods, pork, and some supplements with purchased foods; and traditional, so dried salt cured pork, basically the main thing that they ate, with wild stone ground cornmeal and garden foods to supplement their diet. The study revealed that diet showed a stronger correlation with treatment priority index than age. The authors argued that occlusional changes could not have been due to genetic variations, since this study constituted a single breeding population with little to no genetic influx. However, the authors recognized that genetic effects might have influenced predisposition to traits that affected malocclusion, and that the environmental influence on the oral structures remained present. In simple terms, the genes may have made them more likely to develop malocclusions, but the environmental factors such as diet had the actual influence in making it happen. So with 3 separate studies from Australia to the Americas, diet has been found time and time again to correlate with dental health. So how does this relate to your facial aesthetic? Craniofacial specialists argue that there are 2 main forces that influence facial growth. The first one is mouth-breathing habitus or habits, and the second one is masticatory force or bite force. Oral breathing or mouth breathing due to blocked nasal passageways, asthma, allergy, or infection are well known to lengthen the middle third of the face during growth, resulting in characteristic mouth breather appearances such as a plunging nasofacial angle, recessed jaw, and weak chin, among other facial flaws. However, we'll make an entire video on mouth breathing and its impact on aesthetics soon. There's so much to talk about there, and hopefully we can get a certain guest dentist to come onto our channel. For now, let's focus on the second part of the equation, masticatory force. 3 studies have shown us that the older, less industrialized counterparts of these societies had greater bite force, which should be obvious that chewing harder, less prepared flesh will train your masseters to be stronger simply by the virtue of hypertrophy. There are very clear aesthetic benefits to having proper occlusion with straight teeth and defined, correctly aligned jaws. You can refer to this video we previously did on how people treat faces with jaw prognathism, so an underbite or overbite, differently to those with normal jaw alignment. Interestingly enough, Corosini and colleagues also investigated whether dental occlusion and diet may have been linked to facial width to height ratio. The infamous long face syndrome, aka horse face, or more medically accurately, vertical craniofacial dysplasia, is a significant detractor of facial aesthetic, where vertically long and narrow midfaces are deemed to appear much more submissive and weaker than short, wide ones. In their Corosini and colleague 1985 paper, they looked at Northwest Punjabi youth and West Central Kentuckians, as those regions had documented and observable changes with increasing industrialization. To measure this, they took jaw width, facial width, and total facial height of 315 Punjabi and 78 Kentuckian youth over a period. In a previous 1984 study, they found dental malocclusion to be higher in the urban Punjab group versus the rural, following the trend of every other paper we've seen now, with tougher diets resulting in better tooth eruption. In fact, the rural youth had 8 kilograms, 4 standard deviations more bite force than their urban counterparts, which is huge. Also, both the Punjabi and Kentuckians showed little evidence of genetic drift, to further illustrate that this is a case of lifestyle rather than genetic predisposition. From the results, the urban Punjabi group had generally bigger everything, with the author suggesting that they were larger in stature, perhaps due to better nutrition and receiving more food in general. In the Kentucky group, the rural males had bigger, wider faces by a notable margin. The study found that increased masticatory demand due to tougher diets resulted in longer faces with unchanging width for the Punjabi group, but the Kentucky group did respond as theorized with wider, shorter faces, which is seen as more masculine and aesthetic for men and somewhat for women too. The study showed that this topic needs further evaluation because it's unpredictable whether tougher diets will result in a similar facial change for every ethnic group. What we do know is that tougher, unprocessed diets result in better dental alignment and thus improves your smile and lower third aesthetic in the broadest sense possible. Finding any etiology beyond that is still an ongoing field of research. With all this evidence for tougher diets and rejecting soft, processed foods, you would think that raising infants on a steady diet of meat and tough love would raise the next generation of Sparta's 300. But as it turns out, introducing children, namely infants, on too hard of a diet early on does more harm than good. In one 2017 study, 18-month-old infants who ate meat such as beef and pork more regularly had delayed premolar eruption than those who just didn't. In other words, the teeth took longer to completely grow out. This throws a caveat into the theory that harder foods are better for tooth eruption only when one's chewing ability has developed to match. If you're a fully grown adult, it may be too late for you to influence your dental growth with diet alone. But for those maturing, Dr. Price, from the beginning of this video, wrote guidelines on similarities found in the diets of those hunter-gatherer societies. All of them got their minerals and fat-soluble vitamins in unprocessed sources such as seafood, cod liver oil, seal oil, or animal organs. They all got their raw protein from meats, seafood, nuts, and dairy, with each having some type of fermented food in their diet, such as pickles or milk cultures. They exercised vigorously in gathering their meals, with each culture observing periods of abstinence or periods of systematic undereating. Lastly, the only sweets that they did have were natural and eaten only for special occasions. Dr. Price tested this by feeding malnourished children at an orphanage a tough, fibrous diet, high soluble fats such as cod liver oil, vegetable stews with the bones included, and seafood chowder with the bones and organs as well. from which he found a significant decrease in tooth decay. From Why Raise Ugly Kids by Dr. Hal Huggins, which is a hilariously apt name, certain habits during infancy, such as thumb and dummy sucking, can change swallowing patterns and result in an unequal force distribution, which can create a malocclusion. Also, sleeping patterns do matter when the skull is soft and susceptible to being physically molded. Young children that sleep on only one side of the face can actually cause it to grow flatter, leading to a canine tooth malocclusion. The American Indians recognized this very early on and have traditionally used cradle boards to force children to sleep on their backs, which results in children and adults with good posture and attractive, wide faces. All of this ties back to the mouth-breathing habitus, where certain behaviors in developing children over time can manifest itself in objectively attractive or unattractive facial features. Again, it's a big topic, so it'll be getting its own video. To close out this topic, pre-industrialized societies practiced non-intensive processing of food, which led to a tough diet that required heavy mastication. With the advent of intense processing, food became much easier to masticate, and so rates of malocclusion increased so dramatically that it's been called an epidemiological transition. This trend is seen in virtually every place where the dietary transition has occurred. Because this trend is largely due to technological adaptations, not every society has undergone this change in the same way, or at all. From what orthodontists know about diet and development, it has a big impact on facial aesthetics, but likely not as much as mouth breathing does. Relying on softer foods won't necessarily make your face notably narrower or deformed, but it can cause your teeth and subsequently the smile profile to be less developed. If you would like for us to assess your smile profile, you can order a facial aesthetics report over at koos.com. A special thanks to Dr. Sony Sherpa for helping us with this video.